This is part one of a series of webinars, so we'll be addressing the subject with further webinars in the new year. So please do look out for those announcements, and we trust that the future webinars will also bring benefit to you as an individual and also to your companies. At the end of the webinar, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. Please note that at any point during the session, if you do have any questions, just type them into the chat box. We will pick those up and we will endeavor to respond to as many of those as possible. Your presenter today is Judith Jones, who is a recognized champion of enterprise architecture standards and best practice. Judith is also recognized for her contributions to TOGAF 7, TOGAF 8, and TOGAF 9, and continues to be involved with the further development of this framework. As part of her work with the Open Group and standards in general, Judith has led and participated in many TOGAF and enterprise architecture projects and white papers, and is a co-author of the TOGAF DODAF alignment paper. Before we carry on, can I just, I'm trusting that the sound is all right, and if you do have an issue, please just put in a Q&A or a chat, and we will pick that up. All right. Judith, over to you.
Thank you, Greg. Well, good morning, everybody. I much appreciate your attending this session today. It's the first of a series, and it came about because, you know, as we train people through TOGAF and mentor them through setting up their programs, it always seems to be a surprise to people about how good TOGAF can be when helping to understand EA. I think it does always look very, very complex, but actually it's actually quite straightforward, really. But you just have to focus on the things that the business needs. So that's Toolbox. Now, we don't just use TOGAF, we do apply lots of other techniques, and this is really part of what we're discussing today. So our target at the end of this session is for you to have some tools, or at least understanding of some of the tools that will help the business interpret enterprise architecture and help you to implement the architecture. So first of all, let me ask the big question. You know, can enterprise architecture contribute to the long-term success of the enterprise? We always set this as a challenge. The answer, of course, is yes. But today we also have a lot of other competing frameworks, and we also have in this area, and we also have quite a lot of interest in the Agile community. Now, this I am going to touch on today. It's one of several aspects of this series that we'll be looking at, and I would ask you, if you are very interested in Agile or you have your experiences in Agile, if you could send them over to us, because people are now just starting to get deliverables from an Agile methodology, and it would be good to understand how they've done that. So what I'm going to do is help the business answer this question positively. If you ask them the question, can enterprise architecture contribute to long-term success of the enterprise? Can you work with that? We want a yes. Right, and so this is what the purpose of this session is today. So what we're just going to cover briefly, because we know that there are some people on the event who have not necessarily attended one of our trainings, so they don't necessarily know exactly how we go about doing it. So we're going to just say who AT Enterprises is, We're also going to look at who are the business, right? Big question. People say, well, the business. Well, which bit of the business? Who in the business? How? Those are the questions you need to get down to. And of course, you always get down to a certain set of stakeholders. So we're going to address that. We're going to try and have a look at what the business needs, what skill capabilities they have, and why EA should matter to them, what's in it for them. We will address how you can help them to understand and leverage EA, and there are some examples that we're giving of tools and techniques. And then within the event, we're actually also suggesting action plans, a whole series of suggestions about how you go about doing this. So that's the agenda that we're going to cover. I have about an hour or so, and I hope we will manage to complete within that hour. So, firstly, who are AT Enterprises? Well, we're a new company, actually. We started in February. We took over and bought the assets of Architecting the Enterprise, who was a leading company in the industry. And so we took over the staff and the capabilities, etc., to continue in that work area. And our mission is to make sure that the availability of global enterprise architecture best practices that enables businesses and governments to realise major value in their operations and practices as well. So it's still going to be our major thrust is in the best practice market. So we've been very successful at that, and we have many customers, many global customers who we focus on. They're our core. They have architects all around the world, and we also focus on niche areas in countries, in vertical markets, and so on. So quite a lot of work. Very many organisations, top 10 Fortune 10, also most of those, lots of those, and in the Fortune 500, we probably deal with more than about 60 or so % of those organisations, plus many governments around the world. So we've done a lot in the world of enterprise architecture based on best practice, which in our view is the TOGAF framework. And that's our background. We did actually enterprise architecture for a long time before we joined the Open Group. Lots of major and national top 100 type companies. We've been involved with the development of TOGAF since the beginning. Some of our staff have managed the development from initiation through to TOGAF 7. We've been major contributors to TOGAF 7 as a member of the Open Group, and also a lead for TOGAF 8 and TOGAF 9 for many years. So our contribution covers all aspects of the ADM. In the process of that, we have donated many of our IPR areas to the Open Group. They have reused those and been accepted by the membership. And these include the skills framework, and this was our original focus. How can we develop the skills, and what skills? The first question people say, what skills do we need? So we donated our skills framework, and that became the TOGAF skills framework. We made major contributions to business data and application architecture components. Much of the technology architecture approach was done in the first 5 years or so of the TOGAF 7, up to the TOGAF 7 development. So we, that was done extensively, and so the focus has been for the last 10 years on the other domains in that area, but also covering governance, business value propositions, etc. Much of our skill has been in the visioning and the strategy development for enterprise architecture. We're still there, but now we've switched. We're now switched to the technology work stream of TOGAF because it's a very exciting area. We're just developing a view of emerging technologies, the top 10 emerging technologies according to the World Economic Forum, and we are planning how we can address those areas and assist in the program development of those particular technologies. We've also done a lot of add-ons, so we're instrumental in bringing the Archimate program into the Open Group, and that was because we needed an architecture development language. We didn't feel that there was sufficient out there or sufficient focus, particularly around the best practices. So that was a key rationale for doing that. And as Archimate's developed, so we've gone from Archimate 1, Archimate 2, 2.1. We're now about to issue Archimate 3 next year, which will bring Archimate and TOGAF even closer together. It's already lined up with Archimate 2, but not all parts. Next release will make that a closer integration. So we're really looking forward to that. We, in particular, because we've always supported and have sponsored the harmonisation project between the two areas. We've also done a lot of work with enterprise architecture and SOA and security and other frameworks like TOGAF. So we're very well experienced in how to apply best practices, and we've also worked with other frameworks, you know, the integration with other frameworks in particular. Lots of work's been done in that area. So that's our background, and we still have access to many of those skills, and our objective today is to share some of the outputs that we've had from the work that we've done. I do need to say that much of the webinar material, it's based on our experience working with over 30,000 students of EA and over 5,000 companies globally. So we acknowledge the contribution that the experts have made, and also the students and the companies, and thank them for their contributions to some of the work that you'll see today. And I also need to just add the copyrights of the Open Group and commercial licensing. So I will ask that you conform to the rest of the material that's on that acknowledgement. So let's get going with this particular series. Now, when you start to say how can you help the business, you have to understand what you mean by the business. The major stakeholders in the business are the senior board, the managing committee or governance boards of an organisation. They're critical. What we're doing is structuring the organisation capabilities that they have in order for them to be able to deliver their goals and objectives. But there are also other major stakeholder profiles we have to consider. So today we're going to have a first look at what we call the business chain stakeholders. We'll describe what a business chain is and the type of stakeholders that you would have there. We're also going to look at the business transformation team and the skills that they need. And with what part of the series we will be covering the enterprise operations resources and the stakeholders that are in there. So our focus is very much on what we do, how we train and mentor, how we make sure that we are bringing the business with us and that they become advocates of the enterprise architecture in the organisation. So there are basically 4 business groups in the business of EA to consider. Firstly, you have the business transformation team. there is always a team of people in the business who are proactive or actively interested, let's say, in what is going to happen to transform their business. They have some interest in that. They may have goals and objectives. There may be particular types of skills or leaders within the business, and they form part of the business transformation team. Now, they could be a very loose team, or they could be very tightly knit. They go from one extreme to the other. It depends on how serious, in some ways, the transformation effort is and how necessary it is. So they are the people that we're probably going to focus on most today in helping understand how to use EA. Then there are two other areas that we'll start to touch on. One is what we call the existing enterprise operations resources. These are the guys doing the job in that area now. They have a lot of knowledge about the enterprise architecture, or the virtual enterprise architecture, I perhaps should say, of the enterprise. And we are going to be moving those operations resources over time as we develop the architecture to be the target enterprise operations resources. Each of those will contribute to what we call the transformed enterprise, right? And that will be the structure of the people utilising the new enterprise architecture. Then we will have what we call the business chain. Now, the business chain are those groups of people to whom the transformed enterprise is going to work, who they work with now and who they're going to work with in the future. And it may be that they're going to change as well. And certainly will be, certainly if that transformed enterprise is looking at opening new opportunities out in the marketplace or for their customers. So there will be new sets of the business chain, and these are the most critical part and often the most ignored part of the enterprise architecture area. So we're going to see how we can move into that space. But today we're going to focus on the business transformation team. They're your advocates for transformation. They ensure clear messages and inclusion of the existing operations resources. And so they're a very important part of preparing for the architecture. If they're not on board with you on that, then life is going to be very much harder. So we're going to look at what we need to do for them. So firstly, we ask the question, who is the business chain? Well, you, the enterprise architect, will work in some way for the immediate enterprise unit that is sponsoring the architecture. They will have clients either internally or externally to their enterprise, and their customers and partners, and their customers and partners and suppliers. So the customers will have customers, partners and suppliers who may also be affected by the new enterprise architecture in some way, usually by either added information or faster responses and so on. And so there becomes a dependency. This is why we call it the business chain. So over time, all of these different enterprises that are affected and interface become what we call the business chain stakeholders. So our suppliers, our customers, the enterprise's customers, and the immediate unit that is running with this. And this usually led by the business sponsor in some way, but not always. It could be another unit, it could be sales, it could be manufacturing, and so on. And what we're going to be doing over time is moving them to a target enterprise architecture. Are we going to do it in one big bang? Probably not. Are we going to do it gradually? Yes. And that, I think, is the secret, gradually, to enterprise architecture. Is what you need to be doing is focusing on the job that they have in hand, but in the process of that, building the enterprise architecture, baseline and future targets. Secondly, the business transformation team themselves, I'm going to call them the transformer stakeholders. They're the business stakeholders who are doing that transformation, helping to move it on its way, even if it's only a little bit each day. And that is how we need to encourage them. Think about a little bit each day. We need to understand what sort of knowledge skills they have, what do they bring to the party, but also what knowledge skills do they need to develop, because quite often many of them may not have had any direct involvement with the business chain. So you're going to choose from a large range of individual stakeholders, 5 broad areas. There will be what we call the CXOs, that's the CIO and the CTO and the CFO, and all COO and CEO and all those other chief guys, whether that's their name or not. They may have another name. They may be VPs. They may be known as directors. They may be regional managers or known as business managers in some way. And they may also be within these stakeholders, service managers, project managers as well, executives, people who are going to be delivering, who are going to be in that, who are either in that existing enterprise operation, or who are going to be in the new one. So we're going to call this area the Business Transformation Team Skills Profile. It's very important to do that skills profiling on the guys in the Business Transformation Team, because if they're not able to understand what it is the EA is doing, then how are they going to be able to convince anybody else is the question. So they are an absolute critical part of the team. And thirdly, we're going to look at the actual target enterprise operations resources. Who are they? They're not necessarily the existing ones. These are the people who are being trained and developed to operate the transformed target enterprise operations. So they will have a role in the new structure. They may not know what it is yet. They may be part of a new organisation which hasn't been defined yet. They may be going to use new services like IT services, so IT for IT type services. There may be people doing business for business services, and we're going to call these the target enterprise operations resources. What we are not going to do, though, is forget our existing guys. They're the ones that know what this business is and how it runs. Hopefully, many of those, or most of those, will move forward. But we know that some of those teams are not going to move forward because it's part of the very nature of what we're trying to do. If we're looking at cost-based savings, then we obviously are going to be trying to reduce the resourcing in those areas. If we're looking at revenue growth, we may actually still have the same people and may actually be including more. But at this point in time, not anybody knows whether they're in the target enterprise operations yet. So everybody's very nervous. The majority of the people who will be selected to help in this will probably be selected and confirmed during what we call the migration planning phases, or maybe even later during the development phases once the target architecture is in place and understood and signed off. Very few organisations will actually put the new organisation in place until that target architecture is in place and is in funding. Now, they definitely need to be there by the time we're doing the deployment. Or whom are we going to deploy it to? So here is part of our challenges. Now, some of those teams in the existing area will move on to new pastures. That's often the business case. And so we need to recognise what role they play and while they're still with us, but also, what role they're going to play in the future. So some or many of the existing teams are going to maybe move into being our customers or our suppliers. So it's sad that they're going, but we want them to go in a positive way, not necessarily in a negative way. And that is part of what the job of the business transformation team is. Now, there are 6 stages where the enterprise architecture is actively in helping the business. Each stage has another set of transformer stakeholders. So when you get going, when you're getting the whole program going, when you're doing the vision for the enterprise architecture, and then as you develop the domains that are supporting the vision, whether you're using classic EA domain areas, or like we have in TOGAF, or whether you're developing EA Agile solutions. There are much work that's been done with different transformation stakeholders at that point. And then as we move forward and we formalize our designs, then we have our migration plans, and then we have EA development and agile development and implementations. And then we have the deployed EA and the transformed business and business chain, and then we go round the loop again. So quite a lot of stages that we're going to consider. Now today, I'm going to look at stage 1, 2, and start looking at the domain design stage in 3. So the next series will start to develop the thinking around those different domain areas. And then we will gradually build up the series around that. So when we get started, what do we do? Well, at this stage, the stakeholders are very limited. You may just have the EA, the business sponsor, and his helper. And primarily, you may get the CIO, the CTO, the senior managers probably will be interested in what your initiative is all about. Now, what the business sponsor is looking for at this time is, what are the benefits that EA is going to bring to him? Now, today I'm not going to address all of those benefits by a long way. What I'm going to address is some of the areas of work that he's interested in and how we're going to bring that together. So sometimes they know what they want, sometimes what deliverables they want, but sometimes they don't. They don't know how to change the structure or whether the changes that they think they would like to put in place will work or not. So what do they want from you, and what do you need from them? So firstly, the first thing we really need to understand is the business chain. The business chain is going to change from where it is now. However, you need to understand where it is now. These are the touch points, either internally or externally, of other enterprises. And then other enterprises that touch with other enterprises. If there is a thread of the information flow from your enterprise to an enterprise, and then from that enterprise to another enterprise, this is what we call the business chain, and this is what we need to understand, because this will be the secret. If we are able to establish our focus on that business change, you'll find that the business will swing behind you so much more rapidly than if we just focus on, oh, well, we're going to do X, Y, Z today, without thinking about where that value impact is going to be. So this helps us to scope the potential resourcing required for the new enterprise. And the questions that we ask is, how are we going to communicate all of this with the business? What tools should we use to help them? Now, there are lots of tools out there. There are tools like shared value tools. There are something called the 5C situation analysis, and I'm going to just touch on some of those. There are capability assessments. There's even a Pareto principle for those who are in that space. The business loves this. The senior managers will be aware of much of this. They will have had or been immersed in it either in their business schools or with the management consultants that come through. So we're going to use those tools as the starting point. And the methods we're going to focus on, well, I've just put one down there at the moment because that's what I'm basing a lot of the development around. But we could put others in there as we develop over time, and I will do that. But today we're going to get started in that TOGAF space. So some of the tools that we're going to use are things like situation analysis. This is the information that goes primarily into the request for architecture work that the business sponsor is trying to build. Now, that means that, you know, he's going to have to put his case to the senior managers as to why he should do this. And before that request for architecture work gets to you, he will have gone through that with the CEO, the CIO, the CTO, any other CXO that might be in the distance. And one of the tools that he could use for that is something called situation analysis, where the 5 C's relate to, you know, the company, what we're about, who we're collaborating with, who the customers are, who the competitors are, what's the context that we're doing. The business sponsor has to be fully aware of that. So there's a little tool that they can use. We call it the 5C situation analysis. Another tool we might use is called the 80-20 rule. This is the Pareto principle. Now, business loves this. They, you know, when you're talking to them, they go, oh, it's 80-20. You know, we get 80% of our revenue from 20% of our business. Okay, so when we're going to be looking at that area of their business, we're going to have to do some market research into what that means. If 80% of their profit comes from 20% of their market, that's the one we're going to focus on to make improvements if we're looking at profit improvement potentially. But then we may be looking at the other 20% of profit and saying, well, are they an opportunity to move them into the 80%? There's no customers going to move in that space. So those are the citizens that we're going to address. And so we will look for the market research on that 20% because the odds are that's the most lucrative part and maybe the area we can get a quick win. Some of the other areas may be longer term. They may be where we're doing some strategic enterprise architecture. So we're going to definitely be looking at different 80-20s around the place, looking at which are the areas that we should develop on. And we're going to start to introduce frameworks, EA frameworks, like the TOGAF framework and tools and skills. But mainly those are going to be with the people who are going to do that architecture initially. And some of those skills will be about developing and identifying who the business, the transformation team are going to be. My advice is always find the 5 people that are in the virtual team or find the 10 people. You don't want too many because you want a group that is going to understand what you're doing, and you don't want to be training 100 people in that straight away. You want to get to that small group of people who can then help to train those other people. So we're going to look at tools like this. Some of the tools we might look at, things like use EA maturity models. These are model areas to show how capable you are in a particular area, and you might want to be looking at how you're going to improve, what the action plans are going to be to improve in various areas. You may want to be looking at benchmarking and the framework to improve those efforts. So you can start to classify the measures of abilities that you need to manage and control development. Now, the business usually likes these because they can see what EA is doing, right? A lot of the time they go, I don't know what they're doing. You know, I haven't seen, they came last week, I had an interview and that's it, I haven't seen anything since. What we're going to do then is we're going to, with the business, start to use these to set targets for the development of the capabilities of the business, right? Not just of the EA team, but of the business. Now, one of your maturity lines might be business linkage. You know, how closely linked is the business? That's the one we're going to focus on. We're going to look at how strong we can make that business linkage. So it's going to be a focus for us. And we want to make sure that we can communicate the right levels of capabilities to a business partner as well. You know, as people get to know what's going on or think they know, everybody will be interested. So what we're going to do is a maturity model assessment of what we how we are working with the business and with the different stakeholders in the business chain. And we're going to start to create some joint action plans so they can see what we're doing, and we can also show how they are going to improve their skills as well. So the sort of maturity assessment we will do will be something like this. This is one of our types of maturity assessments. So we're looking at business linkage and transformation. We're looking at you know, how we can get those top level people actively engaged. We can only do that with using their language and using business tools that they understand and relating that with the architecture. So this is one of the maturity assessments that we're going to start to do. Yes, we're going to look at the classic EA, but we're going to look at those parts of the EA maturity that work with the business and the different parts of the business, because all the business isn't the same. And this is the key to success in moving people from where they are to where you need them to be quickly. Then, having achieved our objectives in the getting started area, we're now going to look for the EA vision. Okay, what is it? Now, at this point, we still have senior managers and respected business gurus starting to join the plot. So, from the small team of 3 or 4 or 5 people, we will now move to a much larger group of stakeholders. The business sponsor needs to understand the business vision. So he'll work with his guys, making sure they understand what that is. They need to understand what the scenarios and the strategy development is. We will start to get involved in those scenarios and the strategy development as architects. And while this is the domain of the business planner, the EA actually needs to understand the tools that they're using to develop strategy and talk the talk with the business guys. So many tools they might use for this. They could use something like the Blue Ocean strategy. They could use storyboarding. They could use stakeholder analysis. They could do all sorts of things, doing corporate social responsibility areas. And these are the things we need to be, the enterprise architect needs to be actively involved in. You know, you might be the recipient of those outcomes of how they're trying to express themselves, but at the same time you have to look at those tools they're using and say, how can we link those tools with the EA tools that we're going to start using and encouraging them to make decisions for and with. There are other tools like capability maps and capability-based planning. These are the tools that we'll use to bridge that gap. They help us to relate to the structure of the enterprise. What we're going to have to do is learn to identify capability gaps and associated goals, and these will help us to provide key success factors for the architecture. Now, we can't stress enough how important these are for the business to get to grips with. Not just a tool, several different techniques. These will make all the difference at that time. As many as they can cope with is the way I would put it, because you want them to be able to articulate what they want to do, what they want to say, where they think they're going on their journey, utilizing these sorts of tools, because they will help you. But your job is linking those tools with your tools, right, and seeing how you can put that together. Now, one of the major outputs of a vision is the value chain, focusing on the growth of primary activities and to make sure that we can get the maximum value and reduction in the cost for our supporting activities. And using balanced scorecard, that's a great tool for strategy implementation. Many businesses use that, and relating it to the EA is a thing that you need to be doing. There are many tools that the business will be aware of from management consultancies. So structured interviewing, that's a mandatory tool in my view. You need to be able to hold a structured interview. It may be something very simple that you're going to hold a structured interview with. But these guys, those initial group of people are the people you need to start doing your structured interviews on. Right, and it may not be something necessarily very new, or it may be something where you just say, well, you know, what's the situation analysis? You know, let's see how we can get that situation analysis more populated. It also helps to build relationships with these guys, and it provides a sound foundation for you starting to make decisions with them. And then as you do it with them, then you'll be doing it with these guys as well. So all the new business takers, and there are a lot of those that start to make their way into the vision phase. So the enterprise architecture needs to be articulated using those business tools. It could be value chain, it could be capability maps, and you'll need to help to translate those into views and viewpoints. So here are some of the examples of what you might be using for your visioning tools. You may use Porter's value chain analysis. These are the areas he describes as the supporting activities, and these are the areas he would describe as the primary activities. Now, if you're doing revenue generation, you're clearly going to be focused on the primary activities. If you're looking for cost cutting, you will probably start to look at the support activities that you're undertaking. There'll also be at this time lots of ideas about your solution concepts. So, you know, the idea of moving from 3 separate environments into one, pulling things together or splitting things apart. And then you're going to be looking as well at what those strategic views and viewpoints are from an enterprise architecture point of view. You're going to use all those different techniques. You could use scenarioing to do that, where you're going to, and this little view was taken from Boeing. You know, when they were doing the design of their aircraft, they looked at 8 different groups of stakeholders, actually probably many, many more than that, you know, within those areas. But they looked at what they were, where those viewpoints were, what the main areas of interest that people had, so they could start to focus on where the vision needed to be. So those are some of the techniques that you can use for articulating for the business. But the key thing is that you want the business to articulate for you. And that's the secret. So those business transformation team is going to get bigger. And they are going to be the ones spreading the word. So you need to make sure they've got a set of tools they can do that with, tools they're comfortable with, tools that they can relate with. At the back of it, your job is to make sure you can translate the tools. That's the key. If you can translate those tools into the architecture tools, that's the key. So let me show you by looking at some of the domains first. Firstly, the business domain. We're going to look at the business architecture stakeholders. These are where you start to get those middle management people, the staff members or the senior managers who provide that background work for the organisation. And you're also going to potentially have some very skilled operations gurus start to enter this space. And what the business sponsor wants to do is understand what the breakdown is of the structure that he needs to achieve his his key success factors and other outputs from the visioning. The business sponsor wants to have a little package of things that when he's talking to his peers, he can relate that to them in terms that they understand. Now, Also at this point, many organisations bring in domain specialists. They could be business analysts and architects. Do they need to understand the EA? Absolutely, no way they can't. They need to learn more. They need to look and understand what sort of EA meta model and methodologies that we're using. And the business stakeholders, well, I would say in the early stages, they should be able to understand the business models. Now, the business models is your first introduction to them of EA models. So train them in the business models. If they get to be comfortable and good at understanding business models and finance models and operations models, all you want them to do is to be able to read one and what it means to them. And there are lots of variants, lots of different ways of communicating that. I would do that first. And then when I'm comfortable that they understand that and they can themselves start to articulate it, then I'd start to show them the core TOGAF type meta model. So the very simple EA meta models that relates to their business models. So make sure they can see a linkage between what they're doing and what you've got and what you're selling them with the bigger content meta model and framework. And then explain that the decisions on the structures are captured in a number of deliverables, and we're going to call these deliverables artifacts. Right? That's what we call them. But to the business, they are deliverables. So that's what we're going to call them most of the time with them. If we start saying artifacts, they will switch, part of the brain switches off. So we're going to try to do it in terms. Now, if they use another term to describe deliverables, then fine, use that term instead. But that's really where we're going. Now, when we say that, we say, well, what sort of business models would they understand? So here's a typical business model example. These are the 7 questions you're going to ask them as you build your business model. You're going to ask them, how do you plan to engage the market? How do you plan on making money? Are you selling your products directly? Do you plan to provide services? How do you fit in? Are you being disruptive in any way? And are you creating a new way of doing business? So those 7 areas, even if you're in government, you can ask those questions. How do you plan to engage with the citizen? How do you plan on making sure you stay within your budget, on you're recognised as being successful? Are you selling different services to the citizen directly or indirectly through channels? And how do you plan to provide services or create services for citizens as they engage with you? And how do you fit into all of that? And is there going to be something disruptive? If you're changing something from a citizen having to go to an office to meet with government employees to engaging with in the internet, that's a bit of a disruptive technology, quite radically different for people. And we've been through that sort of transformation over the last 10 years in many parts of the world. And some parts of the world are just catching up, and that's great. So we will gradually start to build up a view about the business model. Those simple 7 questions, phrase them in a way that you are going to talk with the business about what the enterprise is doing in this instance. Then start to look for this type of business model. Now, this is a Google business model. And what they're starting to do is say things like, well, who are our key partners? And what activities do we do? Who's going to do it? What's our value propositions? What's our relationships? Our channels? What our different customer segments are? And you can see from this that their value proposition, obviously web searching and Gmail, etc., they're looking for as much automation as possible. They're also going to be looking at multi-product sales forces, and they're focusing on specific customer segments. And they will relate that with their cost structures and revenue teams. This is a nice picture. How many people have this picture? And many business guys, senior level guys, will have worked on things like this, right, to try to create what is it their business is doing. So you need to understand how they've put that together and what the detail is underneath this, because these are just a top level view of what that model is. And then you're going to be putting the structures in to support that model. So you need to understand it. And then you've got a way of creating business models. If your business, that small transformation teams, if they want to learn more about business models, this is a very good example of describing what you do. You're looking at how you're going to do it, what, who. So you're looking at the infrastructure management, all these different areas, and you're looking at the areas of revenue generation, cost and profits, the financial views of those business models. And you don't have to do it to the nth degree. You just have to do something simple. Even just apply it to a small department and say, well, if we looked at that department, what is it in here? And then you gradually will get them to understand how it works with them and how it works with everybody else in the organisation. So there's another business model that's suitable. Now, the business operations guys will be much more focused themselves on the operating model. So when we start to talk to the enterprise operations resources, we do need to start to understand the models that are used in their operating model and start to relate what we're doing to that. So this is a typical sort of operating model. We're looking at what platform we're using, what capabilities, what legacy systems, how we're lining everything up, solving the geographic spread problems, maximising our opportunities, and how we're going to implement our constant change program. And so this is an operating model. There are many, many, many different types. What is the one that your business currently uses? Well, let's work on something to that. So what you obviously want to do is look at the new operating model. That will be something, well, what's it going to look like? But actually, it takes a bit of time to get to grips with the old one. And what you want to do is use, if you're going to talk to the existing infrastructure guys, you need to use the old one as the basis of showing them how change will affect that operating model. And don't forget, there are other people like the finance guys. They've got their own operating model. They have different ways of determining what the scope of financing is and what the value add that they're going to have to the business. So here is a view as they move from doing standard bookkeeping and transaction analysis to in detail financial performance analysis, linking those with planning and resources and costs, and then providing those business insights. So the finance team are going to want to be moving themselves up that chain of for the operating model. And the finance director in large global organisations, those teams will be looking at how they can do that. And they'll all be across the organisation in different states. Some will still be just doing transaction and bookkeeping, but others will be trying to see how they can add a lot more value to the business. So again, getting them to think about a finance operating model. Work with finance to create one, a simple view that you can then share with the business. And then the EA models themselves. Now you start to slip them in, right? What you want to do is find business models that help you with approaching your content meta model, whatever one you're using, whether it's a TOGAF one or a Zapman one or another one, then, what are you using? Let's see if you can start to link those business models with these. Because if you get that link, it's just like taking them a little bit further along the journey. Not such a shock. So all sorts of ways we can do that. We've got business process modeling techniques. Here's one. I picked it up off the web, but I've done this many times myself. Well, let's work out how we make a cup of coffee, or let's work out, how we get a pizza done. So, who the customer is, who the vendor is, what the customer does, what the vendor does, and so on. Quite a nice little diagram. Simple business will relate to that. And then you start to say, well, we need to know who's going to do this. Who in the vendor is going to bake the pizza? Is that the chef? Who is going to calm the customer? Is that the front line reception or the manager? Who's going to deliver the pizza? The pizza delivery man, and who's going to take the money, right? So then you start to say, who's going to do that? What are the roles? And you gradually build up their understanding of what business process modeling is about. Now, not all of them will be comfortable with it. We don't expect them to do it, but what you want them to do is to be able to read it and understand how it affects their business. So you're going to do a skills assessment, and you're going to give your people targets to improve their skills assessment. And people might be saying, no, you never do that. Yes, you will. Because you say to HR, these guys are transforming their business. They need to understand basic tools, and you make sure it's in the HR profile, right? So you want them to be able to feel comfortable reading a business model or relating to a business model at least. Then from this skills assessment you're going to judge if they're ready for EA. That's what you're trying to get to. Can I move them from where they are now, where they don't know anything, up to they know something, up to, well, they know a lot now, up to, yes, they're very comfortable in reading these business models and can contribute to making them work. So they can start to be able to understand the artifacts or the deliverables. And I keep reminding myself, and I keep reminding everybody else, that you have to try to say deliverables, if that is the term they use. Say artifacts and their eyes glaze over constantly. Now, when you start to do that, and you say, right, they're ready, don't throw the big content meta model at them. That's the last thing you do. You might say, oh, we're going to take you on a journey to learn about this. And you might go, no, you're not, right? And so start with a small core content framework meta model. The white boxes that we call them in the TOGAF core meta model. Start with those. And then show, as they become comfortable with that, how the meta model can be extended. And they'll get lost then. So we now have to ask ourselves a few questions. So this is the type of content framework and internal structures we're looking at. So we use this model. This is a good model. We say, these are the areas that we're looking at. I can build this like I can build your business model. Relate it in that way so they can see that they've got links with how you're going to start to create the data or the information systems and so on. But I would focus on the white boxes, right? Today, I just put up the white boxes and the other boxes, right? Because some of those other boxes might also be useful white boxes like objectives and measures. So that I would start with, just the very simple elements that they can understand what sort of categories of building blocks we're going to create. So this could be something like the core entity relationships, and now we're moving them on from those processes and we're saying, well, so we need to understand who the actors are and who the roles are, what sort of functions they're carrying out. So very simple. Keep it simple. Even if you think you've got to go with a smaller version of that, do, right? Get them used to the concept. And then gradually you can bring them into the infrastructure model and say, well, clearly our model is the white model. We start off with that. That's critical. We get that. But then we can add to this, because if it doesn't quite work, they might start to turn around and say, well, we need to be able to express our products and we need to be able to express our contracts. Okay, here they are. This is how we would go about doing that. So we would add and add and add and make sure that that model works. So then start to do a skills assessment again. Jump into the decision deliverables, right? Make sure they understand these are the decisions they've captured in a structured way. And I'm going to take you through some of these first. So these are the outcomes from your various domains. So I'm going to look at these decisions and I'm going to show them one, right? I always use organisation and location because everybody relates to that. And what I'm going to do is also show them and identify the transitional state of the deliverable as it changes over time. This is where we're going. So they feel comfortable about what that journey is and the levels of decision. And then when I've taken them through that thinking process, I'm going to identify or ask you to who you think will be the trustee, owner, guardian of each deliverable, right? Of each one of those. And there could be 10 people, right? But out of your transformer team, you want to know who of those is going to take leadership position. Then, one of the things you will need to think about is as they do that, how are those going to move into the target enterprise operations resources? So they take that with them, okay? So what they all need to know is to read and understand changes and translate them. So this is a very simple way. So the first one I'm going to look at is the organisation unit. So the way I'm using this, I'm going to look at business participants and where they're located, key ones at this point. I'm going to look at the potential architecture roadmap requirements for transformation and transitioning as well. So I'm going to show them where the journey is going, and I'm going to reference them when I'm developing my requirements to test the completeness. So this is how we take them through that journey. So here's the one that we use quite a lot, and we'd say this is the existing enterprise operation. So here in this instance we have 3 companies that have come together. Z Express, Home and Colonial, and Pacific Rim. Okay, so those 3 companies have come together. Each of them have a billing manager, right? These are the places that they're based. Each of them have an HR manager, or 2, depending where they're based. Each of them have a CRM manager, or 2, depending where they're based. So we start to look at that, and this is clearly where they are now, right? This is, yep, they'll say, tick, that's where we are now. And we'll say, okay, so where do we want to be in a month's time? We've integrated these companies. What do we expect the transition of this to be on the next month, 2 months, 3 months? So, of course, they'll start to look at that and they'll go, well, there's lots of duplication here. So, yeah, absolutely. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to organise those companies as regions. So in the first month or week, right, they're going to change their name from Home and Colonial to Region 2, or whatever region we might want to call it. I just call them 1, 2, and 3, makes it easier. And that's what we're going to do. So they're all going to be this region, and then we're going to transform that region, okay? Oh, right, okay. So in a month, that's what we're going to do. So now part of the new Z Express. In 3 months, our next transition in this area is we're going to have a rationalisation of locations. So if you noticed in what was Region 2 and Region 3, they have billing managers in Australia, but one's in Melbourne, one's in Sydney. There were 2 HR managers in North America for Region 1 and 2. So we've decided that we're going to, in 3 months, move those people in those places to cover that region more effectively. So now we're going to replace, start to merge our billing managers together and our HR managers and our CRM managers. So gradually we're going to say, well, this is what our transition's going to look like in 3 months' time. So you see we've pulled out 1, 2, 3, 4 resources. So we've gone down to the next set. Then we move on to what we're going to do in 6 months. And in 6 months, we're going to consolidate our billing capabilities across all regions. We'll still have regional, components in the billing, but we're going to have one billing system. And so here we start to say all the regions, we're going to have one billing manager, we're going to base it in Mumbai, and everybody's going to work through that billing system. We're still going to have the HR and the CRM because they're out on the ground, HR with the people, CRM with the customers. So we're going to consolidate that backwards thing. That means there's a lot of things that are going to go on in order to do that. We're going to have to consolidate data centers or customer centers or whatever. So there's a lot of work to do that. And that's why we're saying we're going to transition that in 6 months. So now what the business will see is this is where we are now. This is the steps in a month, in 3 months, and in 6 months. And they will get that idea that there is going to be change going on and there will be a gradual roadmap of build up of that. And now you're going to start communicating all around that roadmap. We're going to start to put other things as well. One of those may be the business footprint diagram. So here we're going to look at the traceability between technical components and business goals, right? And that will potentially start to flag who could be the owners of services or what sort of unit functions they have. And we'll use this as a communication platform for senior level CXOs and the business chain. So here is a typical business footprint diagram. Now, we've now got not only the guys we had in the transformation teams and the visioning, but we've now got the added guys in that particular domain. So here is something where we're going to look at the customer services areas, okay? So our goals of increasing revenue and so on, this is where it's going to impact us. So we'll put some business footprint down. We start to understand what that is, what that journey is, and you'll be able to do a transitioning picture to this as well, okay? Now we start to get real interest in it, and we may be very tempted at this point to start delivering our Archimate pictures and our architecture description pictures to the business. And they may look at this and go, I don't know what that means. So we need to do a skills assessment. They can understand that. Is there an interim model between the other and that we can show to relate to this one? Now we need this one. Because we need it for our team, we need it for the EAs, we need it to understand what the total EA views are. We need it. The data architect needs it, the application architect, the technology architect, the developers, the solution people. Even some of the owners, let's call them, or stewards of the architecture need this. Then we've got something like this, where we need to explain to them, well, how are we going to achieve those goals? How are we going to break them down? Because they'll look at that and they'll say, yes, we can increase in revenue, but how and where and what? And so we start to go down lower in, well, increase revenue. We're going to do it by offering a broader range of services in the next 12 months. We're going to do market share in 2 years. So these are the metrics that we need to build our new organisation with. So what we've done is we've focused on the business transformation team first. They're your advocates for transformation. They now get it. They now see the need for the roadmaps. They now see the need for collecting the decisions and how they're going to do that. Then see how they're going to link that with the business. So if they ever have a discussion with a board member who's used to seeing a business model or an operating model, they'll be able to relate their enterprise architecture with that. So that's where we want them to be. Now, so far, we've looked at 6 stages starting to emerge. We've looked at winning the support of the business transformation team. And what the next step is to get them through the rest of all the business deliverables and the decisions required for the structure. Just enough, right? I want to scare them off still at this point. So one of your jobs is going to be ensure they're making enough decisions to enable the EA work to start and deliver. Now clearly, as we progress through each domain, right, we will have new transformed stakeholders who will come on board. And we may have to start with the deliverables that they can relate to. Okay. Hopefully, if we build our portfolio up of our articulation models, then this will start to get easier. But you're still going to have people who don't get it. And that's fine. They may not be the people that are going to move forward. They may be the people moving forward, but we haven't got to the way in which they need to understand their job yet. So we're going to have to go down layer by layer by layer until we get to that. So we've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go down, and we've got a long way to go across the rest of the EA. So what we want to do is break down the architecture deliverables into manageable sets of building blocks and work with stakeholder teams to make sure that that transformed enterprise operation starts to emerge. We do have a long way to go, and my message is slowly kept you monkey, right? We need to plan out. It's no good just saying, oh, here it is, here it is. They don't know. You're taking them on a journey. I mean, one of the things you're doing is training them. You know, well, you may think, well, I'm not a trainer. Well, that's fine. You can always bring other people in to do that. You need to mentor them. You're delivering all the other detail for them. You're there to help all that other detail come together. But you need to enable them to be able to articulate from very simple environments and then just gradually build that complexity up. So with the content meta model in TOGAF, for instance, you're going to be building up knowledge yourself about who are the people who have interest in these and who are the people who you would like to own those or who should be the owners. So you're going to assess their competencies to see if they are suitable to be owners. Now, if you manage to get owners for all of your artifacts and deliverables, see, I'm still saying artifacts, but I'm talking to architects, so I feel I have to. But if you're, going down that journey, you're going to have to plan it, plan the mentoring, plan the deliverables, plan what can be seen. Now, you will be surprised. It may be very tempting to give people very simple things and then throw the complex stuff at them. It may be very tempting. Let them sink into the deep water. Don't do that. They won't forgive you. Best to take them gradually. Fine. Wading out to sea gradually, till they build their confidence up. That's what we're trying to do. They know their business. They're going to be making decisions, with or without us. What we need to encourage them to do is realise we need to document those decisions and relate them so we can trace them all the way through into the enterprise architecture. So we need to assess those competencies of our business. That's very easy to do. You can agree a little program of transformation development, self-development. You could have something every week, a 10-minute exercise, or you can do a little survey or whatever, a little test. How does that work? How does that work? Gradually, you can build their confidence and knowledge up. Now, give them something that's going to take them 3 hours to do. At the beginning, many of them won't have 3 hours. They'll say they don't. The first little team will, but as that team builds up, many of the people will go, I can spare an hour, all right, because they've still got their day jobs to do. So you want to make it small, very manageable, mentoring capabilities, just to build the confidence up. And you do need to assess their competence. Now, you can do that with the HR guys. You could ask HR, can you be our competence assessor? All right, that makes it serious because it goes on the file, right, or something like that. So then they start to buy in. So today we've looked at helping the business interpret EA. I've looked at who they are, and we're going to start going further into who this business is. We start to see there are all sorts of different people with lots of different skills and competencies, and EA should matter to them because they're going to be in this new EA, you hope. Or what's in it for them? So if the existing operations team realise that to be in this new EA, they're going to have to understand various things, then they will. But what you have to do is do it gradually and gently. So that learning process and through understanding the EA is really the way to address it. So examples, little action plans, small goals, gradually build it up so the confidence is built there. So I'd like to just say thank you very much. I hope I've given you some insight into how to go about doing it, how you can help the business team start to build a strong team. We've just done a very short set of examples, and this will always take time. You may be in the middle of an EA transformation now, and where you are doesn't mean you can't do those skills assessments and competency checks of your transformation team. They know they're in the transformation team. Pull them together and just do it as a staging. Okay, let's consolidate what we all know now, right? Let's consolidate these decisions. Let's do a readout meeting of what it means. So I hope that over the next series of webinars that we'll be able to help both you and your business teams to understand the tools and techniques that are useful. There are lots of them. I've just given you small insight to them today. There are lots of ways of expressing it. What we need to do, what you need to do there as architects is link your tools with what they do. So get that articulation going. And that will help the business to interpret the EA because they're operating from a foundation of strength and confidence and that they understand what this means. Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening. And I hope that you've picked some things up. And if you want to follow through, then I'm sure that Greg and the team will be delighted to talk to you. Okay, over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Judith. That is really fantastic information. Thank you for that. We do have some really good questions yet, and I'll be reading them out shortly. If you'd like to add more questions, please do use the Q&A facility or the chat facility, and we will see how we can field all the questions. Just as I mentioned earlier on, there is a recording. The session has been recorded, and we will be making it available to you. However, should you wish to speak to one of the team, if you'd like to find out more how we can help you with your EA initiatives, please do feel free to get in touch with either myself or one of the team members. We would love to hear from you, and we would really like to help you as well. Thank you. So, Judith, just one or two questions that have come through, and I'll read these off to you. The first question is, what is, or is there an optimum size for having an enterprise architecture initiative? Are there some smaller companies that are more suited to agile framework or agile departments, or is enterprise architecture open for everybody? If you could respond to that.
Well, let me go back on what we're doing. Agile is really much more for the small, quick, fast solutions development environment. I'm going to go back to where I put that in my stages. It has to be an active to go down that route. So here we go. However, let's just step back from this. What are we trying to do overall? Agile's good for a project, a solution, the way we want to do something. But what you're building is an EA. And what you need to do, as I've demonstrated in here, is that if you decided, well, we're small enough to go for an agile solution design, that's fine. But you need to feed that back into your bigger EA view, right? That agility will change. There's no doubt about it over time. But what you're creating is enterprise architecture for the long term. And the EA domains direction is for the strategic direction. The agile is all about the quick win areas, whether we could get something in fast, because everybody wants to do a quick win. Everyone gets some return back fast. That's fine. But when they've got that return needs to fit in the bigger EA picture. So what I show is EA domains and EA Agile Solutions design all working together, right? As they develop, and you can choose a very small quick win area, or you can look at your strategic areas for your EA, and then gradually you'll start to get that bigger EA picture made up of many agile solutions, no doubt. But of course, once that agile solution's in place, they become building blocks, deployed building blocks for the organisation, and you need to be able to manage them. Managing them under EA domains is the best place to put them, because they could be there for 10 years. So they need a proper process around them, they need proper management, and as people start to reuse your building blocks, they will develop more variations and so on. And so you still need to build that EA up. So I think put the two together, and start with you're very small, you just want to get moving, get a solution there, that's fine. Don't go down the trap of doing what we've done before with siloed solutions. Do not do that. Also put in place your EA foundations, and then as you build up, then you'll build your EA up, and then you'll find that actually you'll go even faster than Agile Solutions will take you over time. And that's the message we need to put to our business people.
Thanks, Judith. The next question is, what is the role of the CTO related to enterprise architecture? And I'm assuming it's going to be SME companies in small to medium-sized enterprises. So what is the role of the CTO in connection with enterprise architecture in small to medium enterprises? I would imagine that that's the case for any organization, though, but particularly for SMEs.
Yes. Well, every organisation uses these CXOs in different ways. It does depend on the job spec of the CTO. Usually, the CTO would be the Chief Technology Officer. Now, does he have, or is he the Chief IT Officer? And those are the questions, and normally they focus on the IT. But actually, technology is a much broader scope in many organisations than IT. So you need to be clear about what that CTO means. Their role primarily, I think, is to ensure that the foundations for the enterprise architecture are solid. They need to make sure that there is traceability of decision making to the procurement and implementation of technology. So they need to make sure there is that governance around it, that the technology is fit for purpose. So they may need to also think about the innovation around the technology. And their job is going to make sure that that technology is fit for purpose for the role. And as it moves to become what everybody's now talking about, digital management, digital assets, that the digital asset that you have is going to get the best rate of return. That's the job that they have to do, the ROI, and making sure you get the best ROI. And now, of course, they are also at the forefront of learning about technology. So they play a role in EA at I would say at possibly 3 levels. They play a role for the strategic foundation infrastructure, what that is. So at the top level, strategic thinking about technology. They play a role in particular segments of areas, particular domains around, what sort of technologies best suit those particular domains. And clearly they also play a role once that development is done. They may be active within there, but once the technology is deployed, is it still fit for purpose? And that's their job, is it still fit for purpose? So they've got a number of questions to answer. Now, there is a new forum that's been introduced in the open group called IT for IT. Some CTOs are getting themselves actively involved in that. where they're looking at the efficiency of their technology organisation itself. So there are a number of areas that people are using the CTO role for. Large organisations might have a dozen CTOs, by the way, and they'll all focus on the smaller area, and then they'll also focus on the integration across all those different areas, the touch points, the integration points, and so on. So you may find that there is actually a CTO whose job it is to do that. I hope I've helped.
Thanks, Judith. Yes, the delegate has said thank you for that. Right, the next question. Are centers of excellence a good means of helping the business understand enterprise architecture initiatives and best practice? And if so, who should be included in the center of excellence?
Well, yeah, I mean, an EA practice is a centre of excellence, right? Centres of excellence are places that you will find all the skills that you need, but often you need skills which are not in the organisation, and so you may find you've got to go outside for some of that detail. So I would say that you can think of a virtual centre of excellence, including contractors, suppliers, and so on, who may help you to get to the EA that you want. Now, how, are they a good thing? Of course, they're always a good thing, but my concern sometimes is that people go to centres of excellence thinking that they will do all the job for you, and you don't have to do anything. And I don't think that's the case. I think everybody in the business team as well need to understand what this EA is going to deliver and how it's going to deliver it. They don't need to know all the building blocks and components underneath, and only that little bit of the infrastructure that they need to use for their job, or their staff needs for their job. But what they do need to understand is how they work with other parts of the organisation. So I would say that a centre of excellence is a good idea, but over time you want to get rid of it. And over time you want to break it down into areas that are maybe just addressing strategic level stuff. So I would put all foundation stuff in there, like reference models. Knowing people skills that understand the reference models is very useful. All the business really needs to do is be able to read it out. And what you would therefore have with a centre of excellence is not only to be able to read it out, but know how it's structured, so you understand what it's delivering, but at the same time, you would also be mentoring and helping the business to apply it. And over time, that skill is transferred from the centre of excellence to the business and becomes a way of life. Now, it obviously doesn't work for everything, but it should work for many of the components of the EA when you look at the structures of the EA and the building blocks. Now, what we do need to have is the business understanding what the building blocks are, the structures, and what that means to them. And so over time, they will get to understand those things. I mean, if you go now into an existing operations environment, you walk in, and they're all talking a completely different language that you don't understand. You go, what's this sill system? What's that off system? What's that? They know what they are and what they're doing and what's coming out. You don't. And you don't even know how it makes it together. They know. The service IT guys know. They know, right? You have to run BOS, then SIL, then SIF, then X and Y, then Z, and so they know. And gradually, you want them to be able to transfer that understanding to you, so you can put in a transformed variant of that. But that transformation in the end becomes the existing way of doing the job. So over time, the excellence moves into the operations environment. But then that centre of excellence, maybe that's working on a bigger area or another area. So gradually, you help to work it out. I think over time they disappear, probably replaced by something else, but they should be responsible for that common area that is strategic to the business, so they can help the business use it and get the best value out of it.
Thank you very much, Judith. We've come to the end of our time, so there's one or two more questions, but if you would like to find out more about what we've been speaking about, if you'd like to ask more questions, as I said before, please do get in touch with myself or one of the team members, and we'd be very happy to help you. So at this point, thank you everybody for joining us. Judith, thanks for a great presentation, and we look forward to the next time we get together to learn more about how we can have enterprise architecture show value in our businesses. Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.